Hi, Florida House Democratic Leader Fentress Driskell here. How are you? Happy Tuesday. Thank you for tuning in to another edition of the Driskell Debrief, where we get together every Tuesday night and talk about all things Florida politics, what's happening in life, what's happening in our state. I love to hear from you, so please feel free to get busy in the chat. There's always so much life, I feel like, that we live from one week to the next. So maybe let's catch up and talk a little bit about what's going on and what you're looking forward to. I'd love to hear from you. So tonight, I want to let you know that we have a very special guest. We'll see him a little bit later, but we'll be live with Eddie Geller talking about all things campaigns and candidates, plus discussing the need for art and politics. So make sure that you stay tuned. Let's see what's going on. So tomorrow is Juneteenth. Tomorrow we will celebrate Juneteenth, which commemorates the day that General Granger went to Galveston, Texas, to notify the enslaved people that the Emancipation Proclamation had been signed and that they were in fact emancipated. Now, this took place more than 2 years after the Civil War, or I should say after the Emancipation Proclamation was issued. It took more than 2 years for the enslaved people in Texas to get their freedom. I think it's important to note that actually Florida's Emancipation Day is May 20th. Not a lot of people know that, but Juneteenth is something that's become, a national movement, really, to have an Independence Day to celebrate enslaved people being given their freedom in America. It's just as important as July 4th. And I'm so grateful to President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris for pushing to have this recognized as a national holiday. It became a federal holiday in 2021. It is our newest federal holiday. And it's just a really special thing. So in Tampa Bay, all of the celebrating started this past weekend. So many amazing community events. We were able to go to talent shows and to forums where they had amazing speakers. I was able to guest speak at one of the events just yesterday. The Hillsborough County Commission held a beautiful program where they raised a flag in honor of Juneteenth. And if you haven't looked at the Juneteenth flag, I encourage you just to do a quick image search on it. It is absolutely beautiful. It is red, white, and blue. That is very intentional to symbolize that, yes, Black Americans are Americans too, and that our history is American history as well. And it's just a lot of hope in the symbolism of the Juneteenth flag. So what I really want to say to you is happy Juneteenth. I will note that Juneteenth is not a state holiday in Florida yet. There are some states that have chosen to recognize Juneteenth as a holiday. And for many of us in Florida, we will continue that effort to have Florida acknowledge and celebrate Juneteenth as an official state holiday as well. But happy Juneteenth to all of you. I hope you get a little opportunity to do something nice to celebrate. Let's also talk about the state budget. So since we last convened, the state budget was signed by the governor, but not before. He took about $1 billion in vetoes. He took about $1 billion out of the budget. Keep in mind, this is a budget that passed in a bipartisan way in both chambers, both the House and the Senate. Keep in mind also that this is in a year where Florida has had a record budget surplus, a record surplus of reserves of $14.6 billion at a time where Floridians are facing one of the most severe affordability crises in the country. This governor, your governor, I told you, I don't claim him. He took $1 billion from the budget. He literally took money from programs that care for sick kids, programs like the Ronald McDonald House here in Tampa. He literally took away funding for the registry that helps sickle cell patients get the treatment that they need over the course of their lives, from the time they're newborns until they're adults. He took away funding for critical infrastructure projects all around the state. And Florida is ground zero for climate change. I think those budget cuts were cruel. I think he's literally taking food out of the mouths of people who need it most. And I think it's tone deaf to, on the one hand, brag about this $14.6 billion reserves and surplus, and then on the other hand, cut critical programs that fill in the gap that, frankly, government just can't do. Government can't do everything. This is why we need the nonprofit organizations in our communities to thrive. This is why it's important to have these public-private partnerships to try to move Florida forward. So it's a very disappointing, frustrating thing to see from this governor. So just know, though, that we fought as hard as we could as Democrats to make sure that your voices were recognized in the budget. The parts did look the cuts looked very partisan, is what I wanted to say, which is that even though Democrats represent close to a third of the House and about, close to a third of the Senate, we certainly fell well short of that representation in the budget, and that was due in large part to the governor's veto. So that's very disappointing. In Tampa Bay, where I am, there's so many projects that were vetoed, and many of those projects could have transformed in a positive way the everyday lives of our residents, such as the Hunger Relief and Food Security Project that would have only cost $66,842. Yeah, that's petty. So, but on to something a little happier and brighter. You see, I've got this happiness t-shirt on for you tonight. It's because politics can be very heavy. And tonight we wanted to bring you a conversation, yes, covering some serious topics, but with a little more levity and some joy. So I want to tell you about our guest, who is Eddie Geller. A Florida native, Eddie Geller, and his pronouns are he, him, and his, has been working in Democratic politics for the past decade. In 2022, Eddie made his first run for office for Florida's 15th congressional seat. Despite being a first-time candidate, he raised over, wait for it, $500,000, yes, United States dollars, and earned the endorsement of groups like the Progressive Change Campaign Committee, Florida's Progressive Caucus, and many others. Currently, Eddie wears many, many, many hats. So he serves as a board member of the Hillsborough County Jewish Democratic Caucus, vice president of the Hillsborough County Progressive Caucus, and he is the chair of the Candidate and Campaigns Committee for the Hillsborough County Democratic Party. He also regularly performs improv comedy at the Commodore Theater in Ybor City. Please give a big Driskell debrief welcome to our guest, Eddie Geller.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much. I'm so honored to be here. And the fact that you're reading my bio just to me feels off, but I'm honored and so happy to be here.
Well, we're so happy to have you, Eddie. So I thought we would start off with a little bit of tradition. So I have two traditions, actually. When I start a caucus meeting, I always say, today is a great day to be a Democrat. It's a great day to be a Democrat. And I think it's important to do that so that we have some positivity around being a Democrat, because being a Democrat in Florida is real hard. But then the second thing is I started with a dad joke.
I love it. Let's do some dad jokes.
It was just Father's Day. All right. So, you tell me yours, I'll tell you mine.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll start with this one. All right. Do you want to hear a joke about pizza?
Yes.
I can't do it. It's too cheesy. I'm sorry.
Okay. All right. I got one for you. Why don't skeletons play music in church?
Don't know.
Because they have no organs.
Oh, the dad jokeness is off the charts. So good. So good.
It's good. Do you have any more?
I got one more. One more. All right. How do you know when your clock is still hungry?
I don't know. My clock is still hungry.
It goes back 4 seconds.
That's good.
Yes.
That's good. I was almost there.
I had to get one step ahead of you, leader. One step ahead of you.
Okay, this one, I'm going to read this one. This is a shout out to a young supporter who sent this in. This one's for you, Gregory. So, how are frying pans in Europe similar?
I couldn't tell you.
They both have grease at the bottom.
That's beautiful. Gregory, a future comedy star.
I'm telling you, he's a tiny genius. So, thank you for indulging me in that. So let's get into
My pleasure.
So Eddie, as I mentioned, right, you are the campaigns and candidates chair for the Hillsborough County Democratic Party. So Eddie, could you tell us a little bit about that role, like what it looks like, and why is it so important?
Yeah, so when someone is thinking about running for something in Hillsborough County, a lot of times they will get connected to me. And so this is mostly first-time candidates. I did not have the pleasure of getting to consult with you when you decided to run for re-election. But these new first-time candidates, they want to know what the process is going to be like. What's it going to be like raising money? How do they get registered? Do they need to collect petitions? Do they need to file a fee? What do they need to say when they go to talk to people? I mean, there's so many things about running for office that are just not out there, or bits and pieces are out there. So it's my job for the Hillsborough County Democratic Party is to be a resource for those folks, both to be able to help them with sort of getting started and those figuring out what they're going to do to launch their campaign, but also to be a liaison and resource for the party. I mean, there's a lot of things that happen, and I think in a lot of ways unintentionally, that people don't understand. Oh, you can just go to events and meet folks and build your network. I mean, I believe that's how you and I met, leaders. I went to your launch event. I know I told you this before, but you were so sweet. You introduced me to your parents and you said, talk to them. And you really encouraged me, as a new candidate, which meant so much. So I try and bring what I learned as a candidate, to their knowledge base, but also that welcoming spirit. It is really, really intimidating and scary to decide you're going to run and jump in and run for office. And it's great to know that the party, is going to have your back in some way, shape, or form. Not going to be able to dole out tons of money to everyone. There's just only so much to go around. But to know that we want you here, we want you running, we know it's a sacrifice. And so, I'm just trying to be both that liaison and that knowledge base, but also a bit of a cheerleader.
I love that. And thank you for reminding me of that story. I mean, the real rock stars in that story, by the way, are my parents. If you haven't met my parents, I'm telling you, they're just two of the coolest cats you will ever meet. And they're so sweet and kind. So I'm so glad you got to meet them, Eddie, and that was memorable for you.
Yeah.
And, just picking up on something that you said, it is scary. Nothing prepares you to be a candidate, right? I mean, do you agree?
Oh, absolutely nothing. There's never been any endeavor that took every part of me, every fiber of my being, to be a candidate, to be, both outgoing and extroverted, but to work as hard as you need to work, to knock doors and be at events, raise money. And also you are an expert on the issues and you're trying to navigate, are people going to say negative things about me? I mean, it takes so much out of you. And I think anyone who's thinking about running for office, I think should think deeply about it, because it does take a lot. You really don't know until you've done it. But I tell people all the time, I don't recommend losing a primary, but that being said, still the most amazing thing I've ever done in my life. I hope to run again at some point.
I'm so glad to hear that. And, one other thing I will note is that when I first ran, someone told me, he said, that he thinks that every American should run for office at least once, and that our politics would be a lot better, probably a lot more civil. And I didn't have the perspective then to understand what he meant, but I really do now. It's a really difficult thing to put yourself out there. And of course, you should go to candidate trainings and the campaign schools and all the things. It's just that there's nothing like taking that leap and putting yourself out there. So, Hillsborough County, I feel like, is blessed because we have this candidates and campaign committee. We've got not a lot of DECs may have resources, like local parties may not have those resources. And I imagine that a lot of things get overlooked for first-time candidates, a lot of important things. Like, what are some of those things that you see and ways that you've been able to fill in the gaps?
Well, there are resources. Once they come to us and I'm able to say, okay, you can talk to this person who can help with your compliance and, can give you tips on fundraising. I think the biggest resource, and maybe this speaks to who I am, is that emotional piece. Like, what is this going to feel like when you are at an event and no one knows who you are, and you have to just start going up to people and talking to them and saying, hey, I'm Eddie Geller, I'm running for this office. What is concerning you this year? What do you think is the most important thing? And I think preparing folks for what that feels like is really important. Now, and of course, I want people to have their elevator pitch down, and they should be able to, talk to their friends and family and have them support. And, there are those very specific things, but I think about what does that feel like, and being prepared for that is really important because, I've told candidates, like, you've decided to run, fake it until you make it, truly. Like, we don't want to see you go up there, and shrink and not be sure of yourself. Like, you've decided to run. You're an amazing person. So go out there, be confident, own it. And I think that part of that piece, you can't read that part in a book. You can't get that from a training per se. You really need folks to encourage you and tell you that you're it. Like, you're doing it. Go out there and be brave and be bold.
Yeah, be brave, be bold, and I think also work as hard as you can to meet the moment, because running for office means that you're putting yourself out there, not in like, it's not supposed to be, hey, check me out. It's supposed to be, hey, this is the thing I think I can provide for my community that's missing, or the service that's needed. And
Absolutely.
that's heavy weight. Like, you better come to it with some deep, deep thought and emotion in doing it. Which, speaking of which, so you are a former candidate. You ran for Congress. Like, there are no training wheels for you.
Maybe I should have had some, but you know what? That time has passed.
Still, though, tell us what it was like, and I'd love you to share with us, yes, what it was like as a first-time candidate, but then also, what was your why? Like, what motivated you to do that in the first place?
Well, I'll start with the second part first. I ran, after January 6th, post 2020, and, like it is this year, democracy was at stake, and the representative I was initially running against, there was redistricting, of course, so it ended up being an open seat, but the representative I was running against had, supported overturning the election, was really, we were watching, democracy possibly crumble before our eyes, and that is up for that is the stakes again this election season. So that was really my why. Is we got to go out there and we got to protect democracy. And I talk to candidates all the time who are running in tough seats, and my seat was a tough seat to win in. But that's really important. Is we got to put up a fight, and I felt like I wanted to go out there and I wanted to do my part in fighting for democracy. So that was really my why. And of course, like any candidate, there's 100 things I care about. But I will say it was, it's exhausting. It is really hard to get over that hump too of people don't. This is the tough part of politics, and nobody likes it. But you have to raise money as much as we don't like it. And so to ask your friends and family and say, hey, this is the thing I'm doing. Can you support me? That is a really tough part. And I know a lot of people who have wanted to run and they're like, I can't do that. The truth is you can do that. Your friends and family, hopefully they love and support you and want to support you in this endeavor. And especially to your point, if you're stepping up there for your community because there's a need, folks want to support you. So that part was tough, but just so rewarding. I mean, when, I always think of it as there's a spectrum of engagement, right? And on one end of the spectrum, which we want people to at least do is vote. Like, you got to be a voter, right? So that's on the least you can do. And then, maybe you chip into a campaign, maybe you knock doors or make calls. And then on the other end of the spectrum, there's being a candidate. Like, you can't be more involved than putting yourself out there and saying, hey, I want to fight for these things. So getting to be a candidate is just an amazing feeling, and to have folks say, I believe in you and I want you to win, and how can I help you? I mean, that's an incredible feeling. So, it's really tough, but, like I said earlier, it's an amazing feeling. So I'm so grateful I had the chance to do it.
Well, thank you for stepping up to help serve your community and to be prepared to help lead our country. And I love that even though you didn't win, it didn't work out that way, that you have stayed engaged in politics. I also love that for you, politics is, you find a way to integrate it into like who you are. I mean, you are an artist, you are a comedian, you are amazingly, crazily, insanely funny.
Oh, that's so kind of you.
Yeah. Like, what role does art play in your political life? Do you feel like being an artist in this way has given you a leg up in politics?
I think it's so important. I talked about it, and thank you for saying all those kind things. Yeah, I mean, I think we need all different types of people to run for office. Mm-hmm. it's great to have lawyers. We need lawyers. Love them. But we do need artists, and we need people who work in retail. We need people blue collar. Like, everyone should be represented in our democracy. And so the place I come from is the arts. I had a life in Los Angeles where I was an actor and did a lot more comedy. But yeah, I mean, I think, I was in a Best Buy commercial. So that's really big time.
That's one more Best Buy commercial than I was ever in, friend. So I love it.
Oh, thank you. That's very kind. I haven't been the leader of the House Democrats yet. So, it's 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. But yeah, I mean, I think being an artist is about, this is going to sound hippy-dippy to folks, but being in touch with who you are and being in touch with each other and understanding, being empathetic and understanding what people are going through. And I think that's how you do art in whatever that is. And so I think to have that as I'm thinking about what people are going through and what I'm fighting for, I think that to me feels like a superpower. And improv comedy, this form that I love so much, which is much derided in our culture. But that being said, improv is about yes and it's about agreeing and working together. And I think that is just like such an incredible thing. And if and when I do run again and hope to have the privilege to serve, like, I would want to bring that. And I think, an artist mindset of how do we build this together and how do we work together, and think about problems creatively. There's more than just the performance aspect. It's like, how does your brain come at these things? So I think in a lot of ways, being an artist helped me run, and I look forward to how being an artist will help me be a public servant.
I love that. And just going back to the top of your comments in response to this last question, you said that you think that all different types of people should be represented in politics. Dare I say, you might be talking about, I don't know, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Be careful, though.
Okay.
Yeah, but I tend to agree with that, right? That we want a government that is reflective of the people, because we want the people to have confidence in their government and be able to look at that and say, yeah, I fit there and I belong. But I will tell you, it seems that art is underrepresented in government in that way, in terms of the representation and the people who are there. You can see it reflected in the budget cuts.
Yeah.
It's happened. Like, a lot of arts programs were at risk and faced vetoes. So, could you say, like, why do you think, talk a little bit more about why you think it would be advantageous to have more art and artists represented in politics, but then also why you don't think folks are there? Like, why are they missing from the space?
Well, I definitely got comments from folks, because I launched my campaign with a video that was a parody of a sitcom jingle. It was very silly and very me. And I think, most people running for office are not comedians, but you should be yourself when you run for office. I feel very strongly about that. But it can be scary to be, there is, I think, a role that we think of as politicians is these serious people, not having, a sense of humor. Like, we come at it from one way, and art is about coming at our lived experience from a lot of different angles. And traditionally politics doesn't allow for that. And people, if I say something weird or odd, I'm using that in quotation marks, how is that going to be used against me? I mean, it is one of the very few jobs where, like, you make again, in quotes, mistake. The people who are also vying for that job might make an ad or might robocall based on what you said or, what you do. So there is very much a feeling of, well, I can't be myself. I can't be different. I have to toe the line because, I don't want to make a mistake. So it is scary to do stuff kind of differently. But I do think, if we have more artists, representing in all levels, I think, you touched on this point about the funding being cut for arts. I actually have dear friends who are running a giant improv comedy festival here in Tampa. They had their budget slashed and just found out and are scrambling, and of the cuts you talk about, there are much more serious things, but what we love art. Like we spend all, I mean, not you in particular, but a lot of us, we're on Netflix. We love going to the movies. We love reading books. Like that is one of the great exports of America is our art, whether it be Hollywood or books or whatever. And yet it gets so derided as like, no, it's just TV or whatever. So I think to have more folks who understand both the value in arts in our culture and what it means to support it, and that being a full human being is not just what job you're going to go into. Don't get me wrong, that's very important, but also is like when we cherish the arts, we understand all the entire spectrum of human experience, hopefully, and how other people interpret it as, how other people interpret what it is to be a human being in this world. And I think that's politicians could use some more of that.
Amen to that, Eddie. I agree. +1 to all of that. And as you were talking about the importance of art, I was transported back to Paget Elementary School, and I remember being it was Mrs. Krisnowski's music class. Now, well beyond being a first grade, but I still remember my music teacher's name. I remember everything about her. I remember we would only get to go to her class. I think maybe it was like twice a week. We would get to go to music class, and it was one of those places where, in spaces where, yes, we had to behave, right? There were rules, but we were also so free to express our tiny little voices, right? Like free to move around and dance, free to play the instruments, which, as I think about it now, must have sounded horrible. Like free to, I remember when we got to the point where we would have lessons, singing lessons she would give us. And, gosh, God bless that woman. She must have had the patience of Job, because I know it's been awful. But we can all remember what it was like to be in music class, right? Or art class, and just how inspired our little minds were. And we can certainly understand why that's important and want to pay that forward and make sure that art classes and just opportunities are here for young people in Florida's future. So let me ask you, okay, what advice, as we start to wrap up and bring this to a close? Yes, Liam says, without the arts, life would be so dull. Amen to that. Like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
No, in the shower, I think I'm Beyonce, like all day. You cannot tell me that I'm not. Chair, I dance just like Beyonce. Okay? In the morning when I get ready for work, I'm listening to music, right? Like, and I'm practicing my dad jokes, and inspires us in so many ways.
I'm taking piano lessons right now, and it is just it's so fun to just be like, because it's such a different headspace. I have a 9 to 5 that I'm grateful to be working at, but it's great to it just puts your mind into a different place. And you don't have to be someone who practices art, but like you said, maybe you just want to sing in the shower or whatever it is you're doing. It's such an important part of our lives, and to just say, well, it's just art. This is not important as XYZ. It can be important too. We deserve to have our whole humanity supported and represented, and that includes politics.
100%. I think it would make politics so much better. So speaking of that, politics, let's talk about how to make it better. We have so many great candidates running all across the state, and not just at the legislative level, but we've got really great people running for city council and for school board and for county commission and for all sorts of boards. I met some folks down in the Sarasota area, their hospital board. Those elections are a really big deal. What advice would you give to candidates who are in the arena this cycle?
Well, I think the first thing that comes to my mind is I just want to commend them. You are doing the hard work that we need, and a lot of folks are. I mean, this is Florida. A lot of folks are running in really tough races where the chances of them winning is really difficult, and the odds are against them. And just to honestly thank them and know that I had someone, I'll briefly say, I had someone talking to who was considering jumping in for a race that was a deeply red seat. And they are like, well, I'm a little afraid to, jump in, and, I'm worried people might see this as a vanity run. And I'm like, my friend, if you are running in a Republican +20 district, this is not a vanity run. You are doing such a service by putting a Democrat on the ballot and getting out there and helping, raising awareness for all our great candidates, like you said. So yeah, what comes to my mind is just to say thank you to them for stepping up and running, and also to bring it back around, find some joy. Like, enjoy the process. You may never run again. And so there are parts of it that are really going to be great and rewarding. And so take that time, soak it in, enjoy the fun parts, because the tough parts are going to be really tough too.
Amen to that. I think that is so well said. Eddie Geller, thank you for joining us tonight.
Well,
What a delight to have you on, just like I knew that it would be. Thank you for bringing some fun to our live stream stage. Hang out backstage. I'll be right there. I want to chat with you a little bit more.
Okay, I love it. I'll be there.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Well, there you have it from Eddie. I told you he's a phenomenal guest. He's so talented. Make sure that you check him out. You can visit him live at let me get the name again. I believe it's the Commodore. I just had it. The Commodore Theater in Ybor. I think he says he usually performs on Friday night. So if you're in the Tampa Bay area, please make sure you get out and support my boy Eddie. He just brings so much light and love and positivity with him everywhere he goes. What you see on the live stream is exactly how he is in person. And now that I know that he's of Best Buy commercial fame, I'm never going to let him let that go. I actually do think it's really cool. I mean, I've never been in a national commercial, so I think it's really cool. So let's go ahead and end here. But before we do, just a few reminders. Please register to vote. And please make sure that if you are registered to vote, that you check your status with your supervisor of elections. We've been hearing stories about people getting kicked off the rolls and they didn't know it. People's signatures have changed, and maybe the elections officials are not honoring their ballot because the signatures don't match. We know that our handwriting changes as we age or we go through different things. So please make sure that you check the status of your voter registration. Make sure that all the information is current, because we don't want you to run into a problem when you try to cast your vote this fall. Make sure that your friends and family are registered to vote, and make sure that they are enrolled in Vote by Mail too. Also, please note that the voter registration and party affiliation deadline for the August primaries is July 22nd. So if you want to vote in the primaries, which are coming up in August, you need to be registered by July 22nd. That's wild. We're just talking a little more than a month. So really, election season is heating up and things are starting to become very real. So you want to make sure that if you want to participate, you are registered by July 22nd. Also, please share your stories. We love hearing them. I mentioned earlier that I was able to get down to the Sarasota area this past weekend and hang out with the Venice area Democrats. They were so cool. The room was packed. They have so much energy. Really, shout out to you guys. But what was beautiful is that once I finished giving my remarks, and I'd shared with the audience how much I love people's stories, folks found me after the program and started sharing their stories with me. That's the stuff that we love. That's the good stuff. That's what allows us to inform the policies that we go back to Tallahassee and fight for. So thank you so much for your time. It's always a pleasure spending time with you. Make sure that you like us on social media so that you get the notifications when we go live. And please be sure to share our content. Thank you so much. And we'll see you next week when our special guest, I can't believe I forgot to tell you this, will be Brandon Wolf. Brandon is amazing. He is a survivor of the Pulse Massacre. And he's just a phenomenal person. And you will want to hear what he has to say as we close out Pride Month. So thanks, everybody. Take care.